From analog.
Hi, Jim. You have a great signal up here. You're 5.9 plus.
You're digital.
We are everywhere you want to be. This is the CQ Blind Hams Podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the CQ Blind Hams Tech Zoom. This is where we get together to talk with each other about all kinds of ham radio related things, of course, from a blindness perspective. So if you want to learn more about blindhams.com, you can go to www.blindhams.com and you can find all kinds of neat little learning resources and things like that. And of course, the convenient link to this meeting that takes you right into Zoom when we have it on the second Thursday of every month. In case people are new here, just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded because as soon as it's recorded, it becomes a CQ Blind Hams podcast, which can be heard in various places, including any of the podcast apps that exist out there. You can ask your Amazon device to play that. You can go to YouTube, so there's myriad places you can find us and hear this as well as many other things that the folks at CQ Blind Hams put up there, which is quite informative. So if you had a recording thing pop up telling you that the meeting is being recorded, you have to hit the Got It button. Otherwise, you will not be able to access your meeting controls. And I think we've already covered this, but anybody who is not hosting or presenting should keep themselves muted until the time that we open the floor for comments, questions, etc. And of course, we ask that you wait to be acknowledged before speaking so that we don't end up with a situation like we're talking over each other, like sometimes happens on the Blind Hams Bridge. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off here and introduce the crew here. Let's see what's happening with Joel, W0CAS.
Hey, Julian, and welcome everybody to CQ Blind Hams Tech Zoom. My name is
iPhone joined this channel.
Joel, W0CAS. I'm in Simpsonville, South Carolina, and we're very excited to have our speaker tonight because this software that he has developed is very, very needed in the blind community due to the lack of accessible radios being made today. So, bye, Julian.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this presentation as well. Anything that makes more parts of this hobby more accessible to us is a wonderful thing. So, Robert, NC5R, I think you're here with us. What's been going on with you?
Good evening, Julian and everybody. This is Robert, NC5R. Hope I'm getting through. I'm on lousy Wi-Fi at the moment, and maybe I'm making it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CQ Blind Hams February Tech Zoom. Glad you're here and looking forward to the presentation also. Back to you, Julian.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, you were in there pretty much a few little fades and things like that, but we got what you were saying, so very cool. Steve, WB2KTB, KTV. Yeah, there we go, if I could say it right. What's shaking in New York?
Oh, I was just saying that I'm not an HFer, but I used to be. And if I ever have one again, I'm looking forward to trying some of these new programs out, in particular the one that Tom will be telling us about, because these Icom and Yaesu radios are staggeringly popular. They're very prolific, and of course the Elecraft is too, but that's above my price point.
All right, then we go to me. Julian, my call sign's N1CA, November 1, Charlie Alpha. Live in Southern California, where it was a beautiful 81 degrees here today.
Shut up.
Loving it. But hey, we're gonna get a little colder this weekend. We're only gonna be in the lower 60s, so there you go. It's been an unusually colder than normal and rainier than normal winter this year, but it was needed, so I guess we'll just put up with it. But I'm looking forward to when we start having more 80s and less 60s. And today, we are going to also introduce Chris, VE3RWJ. He is actually going to introduce our guest speaker for today. So go ahead, Chris.
All right. I'm Chris, VE3RWJ. I'm in Ancaster, Ontario, Canada. And I first started talking to Tom a few months ago. My local club was talking about putting a remote station on the air, and they were going to use an Icom IC7300. And I can't currently put up antennas for HF, so I thought, okay, maybe I'll be able to use this. I downloaded Tom's program, which was Win for Icom, the Win for Icom suite, and some of it talked, not quite enough that I could use the radio, but it looked promising. So I thought, okay, I'll email Tom and mention screen readers and blindness and all this, and we'll see what happens. So welcome, Tom, Victor Alpha 2 Fox Sierra, Quebec. And let's start with how or when or how did you become a ham? And also, have you always been a software developer?
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. I've only been a ham since 2011. When I was a kid, I was always into electronics. And I remember my father buying me an electronics kit, and I built a shortwave radio, hooked it up to the amplifier in our television, and I was listening to places all over the world. I was around 9 years old at the time, I guess. So that sort of started an interest in that. And I did a lot of DXing with homemade radios for a few years. Got my first Night Kit 100 radio. It was already built though. But at that time, I always wanted to build a Heath kit, but could never afford to buy such a thing when I was young. So along comes 2011, and I'm just going on eBay one day, and I see a Heathkit HW101 transceiver, completely unbuilt with a matching power supply. And I said, this is my chance. So basically, I bought the radio for around $800, which is really cheap for an unbuilt Heathkit. Soldered in the 20 vacuum tubes and all the parts, and studied for my ham exam, and went on the air around 2012. So I've been a ham for around 11 years. Before that, and software development, long time ago, when Windows wasn't really even out yet, I was writing some bulletin board software with modems, just for fun, with OS2 at the time. And I ended up learning enough about serial port programming that I used that while in university to interface to instrumentation, because I was a chemist, and we had a lot of instrumentation, so it was a good skill to know, to be able to control the instruments. So that was in around 1988, 89. At that time, I got recruited to go to work for a pharmaceutical research company. It was pure research, so we were researching sexually transmitted diseases, actually. And they brought me in to manage IT. They had one computer. Anyways, as time went by, I automated a lot of their instrumentation, and then got much more in a management role, and ended up being with the company for 25 years. Then they closed down about 8 or 9 years ago. I decided to retire at 55. But I can never sit still. I always have to keep doing something. So basically, I took a look. I had my Heath kit. I ended up buying an Elecraft K3 because the Heath kit, well, it was fun and everything. It just didn't have the capabilities. And then all of a sudden, I decided once I left my job to start writing a bit of software to see if I can communicate with that radio. And so basically 3 months later, I learned how to program in Windows, set up a website, set up the e-commerce, had my first version of Win for K3 suite out back then, around 2012, I guess, or 2013. And ever since then, just kept growing and growing, and then decided to go to Yaesu and then Icom radios. And yeah, so now I have the 3 products supporting Elecraft, Yaesu, and Icom radios. Now the software is very, it goes in much deeper than most other software in terms of controlling it. For example, the Yaesu radios typically can have hundreds of menu items, and all of that is available in the software. Okay, there's no other software that can do that. And I try to add that in all the different models. For the Yaesu, the Elecraft has all of them. The Icom is more limited, but it's what I think most people need, and I've never been asked for, other items in there. So that's basically my background.
Great. So you've taken, I guess, what's possible with cat control and I guess really exploited it to its fullest potential. What does CAT stand for, and is there much difference between your programs? Is it a matter of just finding out all the parameters and like mapping them, or what's the process like if you decide to support a radio? Is there a lot you have to do?
It really depends on the radio. I try to get the most out of every radio that I work on, and for Elecraft and Icom, it's relatively straightforward. I could add, basically I have a table of commands, and I can add the commands into that table for the different Icom radios, for example. Same thing with Elecraft. Yaesu is a lot more complex, especially the menus. For the FTDX 1200, the 991, the 3000, and the 5000 series, basically all of the menu parameters have to be programmed individually, and there's almost 200 of them. So it really takes a long time. And Yaesu has a nasty habit of when they release a new firmware version, they can just insert anywhere into their new menu commands, and it messes up everything. So it's very labor intensive. The newer radios, the FTDX 10, 101, and the new 710 have a much better menu structure. So it's a lot easier to deal with. So hopefully they don't change much in there. So putting on a brand new radio for Yaesu can take me anywhere from a week to 3 weeks to add it in, and I have to have it present in my hand. Elecraft, basically, they came out with the K4. There were a lot of changes because they dropped one set of commands that I, depended on a lot, and they dropped that in their new K4, so a lot of it had to be recreated. And that took about, I would say, 2 months with putting in features like the spectrum and things like that. So it really, really depends.
Okay. So I got news that I could possibly remotely access an IC7300, and then I found out about your software. And then I sent you an email and said, I'm blind, I'm using a screen reader, I don't use a mouse, and I went into probably too much detail because it's hard to know what people have been exposed to or what they know about this already. What was your initial reaction? Because I think accessibility was sort of a new thing for you.
To be honest, I had never thought about it before. Okay, I just never thought about it. And when you approached me, made me step back and think about this a bit. And I, said, okay, let's try out NVDA and see, what this is like. And immediately I found a lot of issues with it. Okay, so I said, okay, well, what I'll try to do first is, my applications have tons of controls in them. Okay, and sometimes between, the various versions for Elecraft, Yaesu and Icom, I'll copy and paste big blocks into the screen because all the screens are different as well. So all the tab orders were lost, basically. It was a mess. All right, so the first thing I said, okay, I'm going to clean up the tab orders everywhere so that when you tab through the software, it's logical. You don't go from a band to a filter back to the VFO, things like this. It made no sense. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that, and then we'll see how NVDA works out. And when I did that, I found about a quarter of the control, all the sliders, NVDA didn't recognize at all. Couldn't do anything with them. And then a lot of different controls have multiple functions, which NVDA did not get right as well. Okay. Now, some of these things I could get around. Okay. But there were some others that NVDA, for example, got completely wrong and made life very, very difficult. Like, for example, reading the VFO. Okay. It made a mess of it, saying things were selected and unselected and so forth. And so I said, okay, this will never work. So in principle, the screen readers are supposed to follow Microsoft's convention for accessibility with .NET. I mean, they're supposed to. If I look at Narrator, for example, it does. NVDA does not. And there were two things in particular that were important. Any given control in an application written for Windows, at least Windows Forms, which is what I use, has two properties with it. One's called the accessibility name, and the other one's called the accessibility role. And NVDA, if it does not find a name, it looks at what's written on the screen and it'll say what it thinks it is. Okay. If you do put in a name, then it does it correctly. Unfortunately, when it comes to the accessibility role, one of the options is called none. And what is supposed to happen is that if NVDA encounters that, it should do nothing. You shouldn't try to assume it knows what it is. And the same thing with the name. If the name is blank, it shouldn't say anything. But that's a big problem, because I would think that a lot of software keeps that name blank. Mine was completely blank from the beginning, every single control, because I didn't know any better. And so the problem then becomes that NVDA has to do it anyways. And I think this is a bit of an issue for screen readers in general. They have to provide something to the visually impaired, and in some cases they're going to have to guess. But what I have done is I pointed this out on the GitHub for NVDA development, and I said, look, guys, you should, follow the .NET conventions, or at least have an option to follow them by application. Okay. I brought that up, and there's a number of people who responded saying, yeah, you're right, and everything. And they think that could resolve a lot of things, but I've never heard back from the developers. And there's over 2,800 open issues with NVDA. So I wouldn't expect them to get this resolved. So basically, I was left with either have half the controls not working at all, okay, or scrapping this. And doing it myself turned out to be very, very easy. It's basically 2 lines of code for every control. Okay. And a lot of them can be automated, so you don't even have to have any code there. So that's what I ended up doing. I did this initially for most of the things that someone would, without vision, would use. I mean, there are certain features like the spectrums and things like that I have not done. But it's a matter of time as well. I have 3 applications and maybe 8,000 users. So I'm busy with a lot of things and support. But the code is fairly mature now. It's not a lot of new coding or features to be added. So now I'm working on concentrating on improving the visual accessibility of my software.
And I mean, I have to thank you for both that detailed explanation, because I think often when we contact developers, we don't really know what it's like from their side of things, their point of view, and what they have to deal with. So first of all, thank you for diving into this.
I hope I'm not too technical.
No. I'm sure some people will find that interesting, and We'll all learn something. But thank you for diving in head first, for joining the NVDA developer forum, and really, looking into this. And then when you ran into problems, you still figured out a better way to do it for your applications, which was going self-voicing. So thank you for persevering. You could have very easily just, written me back a short note saying, nope, sorry. Which does happen, believe it or not, sometimes when we contact people. So it's great that you're so keen to implement a lot of this stuff, loads of strokes and proper tab orders and everything. I didn't realize a lot of these new rigs had so many options and features until I started playing with your software. I've been out of HF for a while, so even just the 7300, there's an awful lot packed into that radio that I'm now aware of. So let's see, where should we take it? I have the application open. I don't want to do an in-depth demo, but I think if I share my screen, we should be able to hear the speech and the audio coming from the radio, which is about 30 miles away from my QTH. So I am connected remotely. Before we get into that, what's the process? I guess I should sort of explain. Right now, there's a radio about 30 miles away that I'm connected to, and on their end, they're running your server application. I'm running the suite and an audio driver that I guess handles the audio to and from the remote radio. I hope I have all of that right so far. What's the process like if someone has one of these radios right on their desk and they want to access it from the computer? Do they still need to run both applications, or is there a way to access it remotely, but obviously a very short distance, just connected to your PC?
Yeah, basically you just plug a USB cable into your computer and then plug it into the radio. Okay, so and then you just run Win for Icom or Win for Yaesu. No need with the network clients or anything like that. Okay. So it's very simple. Well, here becomes the more difficult part of things, because it's fine that my software has this interface, and I tried to make it as easy as possible to use. But there are aspects of hooking yourself up like this that are not quite so obvious. For example, you have to download a driver from Yaesu. Okay, you have to install the driver. Okay, so that's the very, very first step, and then you have to use the what do you call it, device manager to find out the COM port that was assigned. Okay, so all of these are challenges.
Tom VA2FSQ.
And there's not much I can really do to help there. One thing I will be doing is just this general maintenance item for my software is putting actual links to the drivers. Before I didn't. But for the Yaesu and Icom radios, the manufacturer of the drivers, a company called Silicon Labs, has a really nasty habit of making changes in their new driver, like a new driver that no longer works. Okay, and so basically, there are specific drivers that work all the time, but some people get automatic updates, some people download the new drivers, and things don't work anymore. So I want to have it very clear. And, as part of the documentation for the accessibility, I'll try to explain the easiest way to get the drivers and to install them and so forth. That's something, I plan to add to the documentation.
Yep. And I'm sure some of us in the community can certainly help with that too, and tutor each other. And we're helping each other out a lot with stuff like this. So just as we were talking, the radio that I was monitoring just went silent. So I'm going to close it and relaunch it. and see if I can get it going. And if I can't get it going, at least we'll at least hear the speech as we tab around and some of the controls and so on. So I'm just going to run it again. And
there's one thing I've added, at least to the Elecraft software. I haven't got around to Icom and Yaesu yet. Is a control for the speed of speech. I noticed that when I was with you on a Zoom in the past, that I couldn't really understand anything the software was saying because it was going so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, now I understand why you would want that, because, it takes time. And, once you follow, so there will be a speed control in the software.
Oh, great. Okay. That's really nice. Okay. Well, I'm not getting audio from the radio, but I have the software open. It says it's connected and I am getting speech. So I'm going to share my screen.
Chris Smart has started screen sharing.
Okay, and I'm going to shut my speech up. So for NVDA, I just went NVDA plus Shift plus S to turn sleep mode on. So in this current window, which is the Win4Icom window, it's now going to stay out of the way. But if I Alt-tab to other windows, my speech comes back. And I mention that because your software will work with third-party applications, right? Contest logging and
yes,
all those other things that people use. So
yes.
Okay, so I have Win4Icom up here. I was listening to WWV. I'm not hearing it anymore, so I'm not sure what happened there. But as I tab around,
VFOA slider.
That's a slider for VFOA.
VFOB 11,607.9 kilohertz. Fine
Just to
tune
give
selected.
people an idea, and
medium tune.
I mean, I could do this for a long time because there are a lot of things you can
coarse tune
adjust and get to. And I'm only tabbing. There are keyboard shortcuts for tons of things.
VFO to B.
For instance, is it Control V for VFO?
VFOA 10,000 kilohertz.
And it's on 10,000. And one of the things that was not tracking before when you tried doing this with NVDA was this field, because I can arrow to one of the digits and then up and down arrow. I can arrow left and right between the digits and then up and down arrow to change them if I wanted to change
digit 1 megahertz
frequencies that way.
VFOA frequency 11,000 kilohertz.
So I just put the 1 megahertz digit up by 1, so now we're on 11,000. I haven't played with this much. Can I just type in the field too?
No.
If I have a frequency in my... No? Okay.
No, well.
VFOA frequency 15,000 kilohertz.
So let's... I have 15.
VFOA slider.
15 megs. What are some other hotkeys I can try? Do you have hotkeys to go to each...
we'll go to the band.
Right. Okay, so Control B for band.
160 meters.
And I'm on 160. And if I tab...
80 meters.
Yep.
60 meters. 40 meters.
So if I want that one, I would just hit Enter, maybe?
Yep. 40 meters selected.
Yep. And then Control V would take me back to the VFO.
Control
what else
M,
do you think we should show off?
Okay. M for mode.
USB.
There we go. And we're on USB.
LSB selected. CW. CWR.
Etc. What's the keystroke for reading the signal meter? I think people might want to hear that.
Trying to remember. Control L, possibly?
Jim DT joined this channel.
I'll try Control S, maybe. Nope. Oh, well. But it is in there. It is in there. You can read the signal meter.
AM.
Can you do, okay, never mind. Go ahead.
What's that? Nope.
That's okay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you to open up the manual for that, which is Alt H.
Help menu.
And the first
Press
one.
A for accessibility help.
Now you have the screen readers down below. If you go down, we can get a list of the items.
Jesus.
Page down.
I'm just going to search for
S meter.
S meter.
Oh. Meter that just S.
It must be in here. Meter. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Control L.
Control M. Sorry.
L.
L. Sorry. Okay. So I went back to the IC 7300 window. No, it's not going to read. For some reason, I'm not getting audio back from the rig, but
right.
I am going to do a proper demo probably in March where everything works, and I'll probably go through setup and how to get going.
Are you back on the screen of the radio?
Yep, I should be.
And if you do, for example, Control M, you get back to USB?
USB.
Okay, good.
Yep,
try
USB.
Try Control Shift L.
Nope.
Okay, that's interesting.
Anyway, there's something going on, but
yeah, okay.
Is there anything else we should maybe show off? All the sliders are labeled like RF gain, AF gain.
Jim KB0UZT joined this channel.
All that stuff is accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an automatic tuner in the 7300, but will it read SWR?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, I did not put that in there because it's a visual meter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it's something, I haven't got any feedback whatsoever yet on.
Yeah, well, I'm sure people will.
There's going to be things that people would like to be able to do, and I don't know.
I know mine was I know one thing I was looking for was the CW terminal.
Yeah, that's next
for sending code. Yep.
Well, if you do an Alt T.
Tools menu.
Yep.
No, not that.
Press I for input/output menu.
Right.
Press S for settings menu.
Sorry,
right arrow. The window.
Window menu.
Yep.
Press F for frequency memories. Press M for CW memories.
Only two are done so far: CW memories and frequency memories. But there is a CW terminal in here. But Yaesu has no way. Oh no, never mind. The Yaesu radios require a WIN key. Okay, it's a device which you can hook a key to it, and it plugs into the push-to-talk circuit on your radio. Okay,
right.
Icom and Elecraft both give you a way to have a terminal where you can type CW. Okay, and it goes out as CW, but Yaesu does not. So Yaesu have that feature.
Yep. Well, there's bound to be some differences. Another thing I wanted to ask before we open it up to whatever questions other people have. You mentioned to me in one of our emails about remote control units, because someone asked me too. They talked about how they mentioned preferring actual knobs and buttons and so on. And I think you mentioned to me there are units available from the likes of Elecraft for adding controls.
Yes. Elecraft has a device called a K-Pod. Okay. And you can use that. It comes with a nice large knob that is assigned to the VFO. And it's got a switch to allow you to either use the VFO A or VFO B. And it has 8 buttons that can be assigned to macros. So they can do various functions for you. You have one button just be for example, USB, one button for a particular filter as you wish. Okay.
Right. So they're all assignable and
yeah. And so there's the K pod, and Icom makes something called an RC28, which is the same idea, but it has only 2 buttons, and those 2 buttons are best used for managing the increment of tuning. So, you have the knob to tune the VFO, but you don't want it to always tune by 1 hertz. You might want to tune by 100 hertz or kilohertz. So it's used for that. So when you look at the 2 of them, I feel that the Elecraft is much more flexible.
Sure.
All the radio.
Now, does it matter which controller you use with which brand of radio, or can you?
No,
can you use the K pod with?
If you use my software, the Icom control will be usable by Yaesu and Icom radios. The K pod from Elecraft can be used with all 3. I didn't bother making the Icom one for the Elecraft because I'm pretty sure no one will buy an Icom controller for an Elecraft radio. So.
Yeah. No, that's great because then you can just get the better controller and
makes it easier, and it also supports any device that can map keyboard commands to the device. So, there's Shuttle Pro makes there's something called the Shuttle Pro, and it's got a jog wheel. Yep. And every time you turn it in one direction, it basically sends an F9 to the computer. Turn it the other direction, an F10. And that's mapped in my software to the VFO, for example. And you can also assign macros there as well. That's another option.
Yeah, this is going to sound very familiar to some of us who do music work, who are familiar with MIDI control services. It's kind of the same, the same concept
but
where you want actual faders.
MIDI controllers do not use keyboard commands. So I don't support MIDI controllers.
Right. No, I just meant the concept is the same of adding physical controls. Okay, well I'm out of questions. I'll pass it back to Julian, and then maybe we can open it up, and I'm sure lots of you have things you want to ask Tom. And
all right, well, thanks, Chris, and thank you, Tom, for this presentation. And I also want to thank you, along with what Chris had said, for caring enough to want to make your product accessible to those of us who can't do it visually. Like Chris pointed out, there's a lot of people that
Chris
you
Smart
write
has
to them
stopped
or
screen
contact
share.
them, and they just kind of cut you, they just kind of write you off. It's like, well, not enough of our users want it. It's a lot of work. And I really appreciate that you took the time and that you were tenacious enough and went and played with NVDA and got involved at the forums. I mean, it's just wonderful. I think this is great. So I just wanted to join Chris there in saying thank you to you. Really, very much appreciate your contributions to our community. So anybody here in the meeting want to make a comment or ask a question?
Got a couple.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Thanks, Tom, for coming and joining us tonight. My first question is about the remote access. When a ham club decides to use a remote access software to server, does it have a login, and can the login have like a timer set on it? So if you got members can use it 1 hour per week or whatever, is that something that can be written into the software if it's not?
It depends. Okay, only 2 of my products at this time have true remote capabilities, and that is the Win4K4 suite for the Elecraft K4. I mean, that's built into the radio. And then Win4Icom. And Win4Icom was really, designed for a one-person kind of remote access, not for, the ability to have many people go in, because it's a basic networking interface. And I have prototypes of making this much more useful in a club setting. I haven't released it yet, mainly because it's a fair bit more complex. And, you know, I sometimes, you know, worry that if I put in something that's too complex, it's just going to, you know, end up being a support nightmare. And that's one of the reasons I haven't done it. And, you know, thing is if people ever read the documentation, things would be a lot easier, but let's face it, they don't. But I can't make everything super simple, you know. So the functionality is there for those two products. For Win4Yaesu, for example, you could use TeamViewer. That would work the same way. But there is nothing for managing multiple users in the club setting, for example.
Okay, thanks for that. Second thought, and this question, I wonder how many people has got the same question. Have you ever thought about doing this for Kenwood? And the reason being, Kenwood has some pretty decent cat control software, and the radios with the VGS3 voice guide chip for the 590 and the 480 SAT 480HX is pretty good, but it doesn't speak the menus like what your software would do. So I'm just wondering if you've ever thought about doing it for Kenwood radios.
Okay, so, you know, I've been approached by people wanting me to do Kenwood, but very few. Okay, so maybe I could say 4 in the 8 years that I've been doing this. You know, I wouldn't be averse to doing so, but the issue there is, as I've mentioned, I have to have the radio. Okay, and I currently have 14 radios packed up in my computer lab, and so I'd have to add more. And you know, it's got to be cost effective as well. I mean, some of these radios, an FTDX 101, which I bought last year, you know, is almost $6,000 Canadian, you know. So by the time you add up all these radios, you have to have a financial return for them. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't really make sense. So, you know, in the case of Elecraft, for example, you know, one of their new K4 radio, one of their items that, you know, they really pushed is the ability to have, they were going to provide software that could be used remotely with their radios. And that would be like, just like having the radio there. Okay. And so when I heard that, I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to bother writing Win4K4 because the minute Elecraft software comes out, nobody's going to buy mine and I'll have to buy the radio. And, you know, I had a discussion with the head engineer there for Elecraft, and he says, let me see if I can get you a radio. Would you do it? And so I agreed. So they basically have given me a radio and I'm able to do it. Now, if I could find someone at Kenwood that would provide me the hardware, that would be a completely different story. But having to buy it, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. And there's talk about Kenwood getting out of amateur radio, but that's a big rumor. We don't have anything to substantiate that. All right, you mentioned price. I haven't heard anything about price until now. What is the price for your different suites, if you don't mind sharing?
Sorry, say that again.
The price. You mentioned price for your software. What? I haven't heard anybody say anything about price.
I'm sorry. I'm not visually impaired, but I am hearing impaired. And so I didn't understand that word price.
He's saying price.
Oh, the price. Cost. Okay. It's $60 US.
Okay. That's all I've got, Julian. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
KB60A.
Go ahead, KB60A.
Came from B City also.
Okay, Margaret will take.
Yeah, no, I was just
accepted.
wondering, he mentioned it working with NVDA. Did it also work with Narrator or not? I wasn't clear on that.
Narrator followed the conventions for a .NET application. In other words, if I put nothing in the accessibility name for a given control, it wouldn't say anything, which is what it shouldn't do. Which is what it should do. And if I put the role as, but then it didn't matter because it wouldn't say anything no matter what. It wouldn't assume it was a particular control. So it worked correctly. NVDA, on the other hand, if I put in, no matter what I put in for the name, even leaving it blank, it would always assume it knew what the control was, and that's where it did not do a good job.
If I could just add, so Tom's applications are self-voicing, meaning they generate their own speech. So whatever screen reader you have, you want to put it to sleep and let Tom's program do the talking.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, and Margaret?
K1B City with a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to understand, so when you would like to enter a frequency, you'd go and select a band like Chris did, and you'd hit enter on the particular band, and then you'd go back to the edit box where it had the area where it had the display, and then you'd arrow to the right or the left on the controls where you wanted to change the display, and then arrow up and down. Is that right?
Yes.
How does it work?
Currently, the way the VFO implementation is that once you are focused on the VFO, it will tell you the frequency you're on. Then you can use the right and left arrow keys to go to a particular digit, and then the up-down keys to change that digit. So that's always been part of the software, but now it tells you it via speech what digit you're on. You're on 100 kilohertz, it'll tell you digit 1 kilohertz or digit 10 hertz. And then the up-down arrows, if you press them fast, you won't hear anything until you get to the last press, and then it'll read out frequency to you. Mm-hmm. There is the possibility, but you see, to double click the frequency, okay? And that opens up a keypad where you can type in the number, okay? I didn't do anything about that for visually impaired. I don't know if you guys want to double click something. So, this is one of those things I need feedback for. I need to know what would be a good way. Maybe
we would hit enter on something on the spot.
Maybe something as simple as a control character, a control sequence, like control. I mean, all the letters are starting to get taken up. A control shift V, for example. And a box will open up and allow you to type in a frequency. Maybe something as simple as that,
That would be awesome.
So, this is why it would be good to have some feedback and, how to move forward on these kind of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would definitely second that. It's always preferable to be able to enter something via a keypad, especially something like a frequency, instead of having to do the arrowing. Okay. So I would definitely give that feedback as well. And before you were talking about price, and you were talking about also your costs with all these radios. In the event that somebody would want to help you offset costs, maybe they don't need the software, they don't use HF, but maybe appreciates what you're doing. Do you have a way of accepting donations?
Well, there's no donate button on my website. I was thinking of adding one, but mainly for to offset maintenance costs, because I've never charged a yearly fee. Support and maintenance have always been free, and it's been like that for the last 8 years. But, you know, as time goes by, the number of units you sell slowly drop off. What the cost of the websites and the security and the software development, all of that keep going up. So I was planning on putting a donate button for that. So there will be one eventually. Just when, I don't know.
Yeah, because I think it'd be a great idea. Like I said, there may be people who are listening to this later in a podcast and really appreciate what you're doing, but may not necessarily have a need for that software themselves, but appreciate that that you go to the lengths you go to work with us and put out a product that includes us as your user base.
If I could ask it this way, do you need to own a radio to support it, or could you borrow one for a month or two? If someone said, "Hey, here's my I don't know, TS890 or something," and
I've got 14 radios there.
Yeah.
And, when I make some changes to the software that are more substantial than just very small bug or whatever, I like to test the software against each radio, see that I haven't introduced something that could be a problem for a different radio.
Right.
Yaesu, they have 2 series of radios, FTDX and the FT series, and they're substantially different, and they're a bit of a nightmare to program because they're very different in certain ways. And, you can't even use the same screen, for example, with them. And so it's a bit of a problem. So having a radio is really useful because, sometimes you have to step through the code to find bugs and things like that,
Yeah.
What you can do about that.
KN4MLR, Russ, with a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
I read through your website, and it does support third-party software. I noticed that WSJTX is supported, which really caught my attention. For us blind users, we also use a program in conjunction with WSJTX. It's called QLog. QLog uses the same approach that you do, as they use the SAPI voices to identify where you are. But I'm wondering if you could add, in addition to WSJTX, if it would also support using that yet another program, being QLog, to be able to operate FT8.
So QLog, it does what exactly? It's just an add-on to WSJT?
Right. It makes WSJTX accessible for a blind person. WSJTX, in a sense, is, or for all practical purposes, is not accessible.
Right.
And QLog, although it started out as a logging program, the developer, Sam Birnbaum, added the ability to attach to WSJTX. And with that, the blind user is able to operate FT8, where if they didn't have it, WSJTX would be next to impossible to use. I mean, it could be done, but it would be so tedious it wouldn't be worth it. So I'm just wondering if you can have yet another program running at the same time alongside WSJTX, so that we could operate at FT8.
There's nothing I could do with my software in any way to add accessibility to WSJT. Okay, so QLog would, for example, still be needed with WSJT. Winfor, all my products have this feature in them called virtual radios. One of the problems with a lot of ham radio software is that all these programs came out and they all needed the same COM port. And so people were trying to split the COM ports and running various utilities to do so. And they'd work for a while, but then they'd fail. Okay. They were not reliable solutions. And so when I built my products, I decided from the beginning to have the ability to have in my software virtual radios. So you can connect up to 6 other applications at the same time to my software, and it's fully managed internally, each under its own thread operating and so forth. And they never clobber each other. They never interfere. So, I mean, if you did something like that, then WSJT would go through my products, and the Q log would still be running.
Okay. I was, while you were explaining that, I was thinking, I don't think QLog uses a COM port. I think it connects directly to WSJTX. Well, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's the impression that I got in using it over the years. So it looks like if WSJTX works with it, it sounds like it will be something that'll work with QLog. Let's see, the other question was that, and this was just thrown out a wild idea on the prospect of using a knob of some sort for selecting frequencies. Would a mouse wheel, could that be used?
Oh yeah, you can use the mouse wheel as well. If you move over with the keyboard onto a given digit, for example, of the VFO, you can use the mouse wheel to go up and down. Okay. And you could use the plus and the minus keys on your keyboard to adjust which frequency is being managed with the mouse. So basically, once you're focused on the VFO, use your mouse wheel, and the plus and the minus on the keyboard will use the mouse wheel for any given digit. Okay, so like 1 kilohertz or hundreds of hertz, and the mouse will work.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an improvement. I was thinking more in terms of if you could use the mouse wheel, not unlike you use the VFO knob, where you're just continuously, well, I guess if you put it on the, let's say the kilohertz digit, once it got past 10, would it roll over to the 10s? Yeah, so you could scroll that way.
Yeah, it tunes
okay.
Or 10 hertz even.
Exactly the same as on the radio.
Yeah, okay.
Plus minus will just, select which digit. On the radio, you actually have to press the touch screen to select the digit you want to tune by. Okay, so in a lot of these radios, you'll see the frequency displayed on the touch screen, and if you touch the 100 hertz digit, and when you turn the knob on the radio, it increments by 100 hertz each time. Okay, and this is exactly the same.
Looks like it's looks like you got it figured out there. Having developed the CAT program myself for an ancient Kenwood 440, I know what you've got put into this. And I have to say $60 is a bargain. So with that, I'll turn it back to Julian.
Oh, thanks for that. And I agree. I mean, it really is a great value. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Julian, am I on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Tom, I have all Elecraft gear here. And apart from the K3 and K4, which obviously your program covers, not that I would use it for any of the other transceivers that I have, but will it work, say, with the KX3, KX2, things like that?
Currently, I've only done it for the K4. Okay. I still have to do it for the K3. I haven't had any accessibility to that. But the minute I do that, it'll work for both the KX3 and the KX2.
Good. Thank you very much.
I plan on doing it, but it's not going to be until March. I'm actually going on a week's vacation next week. I haven't gone in 1 in 3 years, so it's time to get away a bit.
I think it's definitely time for vacation. Wow, that's a long time.
VE3RVQ has a question.
Go ahead, VE3RVQ.
Awesome. Hi, name's Rylan, relatively new to this Zoom call. I was wondering, I'm an IC705 user. I'm typically out in the field. And I'm wondering if it's possible to run your server application and your client application on the same machine, so I can use a Wi-Fi AP generated by the 705 instead of a USB connection, because I find I get a lot of RFI on it.
I think we just lost you.
Sorry, I was done. I was wondering whether it was possible to run your software through the Wi-Fi access point generated by the IC705 instead of the USB connection.
Yes, it'll work, but I have to tell you, it's not very reliable. Wi-Fi connections, Wi-Fi connections in general take a fair bit of knowledge to get them to operate properly, and a lot of times they just can't handle it. And you know, you're going to be presumably in this case having a to think. Wait a second. I'm thinking of what your situation is here.
Yeah, I'm usually out in the field, so the IC705 generates its own AP. I'm not connecting to a mesh network or anything like that. It's either that or I have to slap some kind of toroid, like a ferrite toroid, onto a USB. Yeah. So I was just wondering if the Wi-Fi would work at all. Thank you, and I really appreciate your making this software.
For Icom, okay, Icom's a strange company, okay, because they've released all their new radios with Ethernet connections and Wi-Fi and so forth. However, they have not published the protocol for the Ethernet connection, and it's encrypted. All right. So in order to go ahead and use it, you have to reverse engineer their encryption and take a chance that Icom's lawyers don't come after you. Now, it's been done, and there's some software out there called Waterfall View, okay, which basically has reverse engineered the whole thing. And so now they have a control program for Icom radios. But it's free software and open source. I can certainly go ahead and use that, but being a commercial company, you have to be concerned about breaking their legal agreement, okay, by reverse engineering it. So I have not done any direct access to the Ethernet port or the Wi-Fi port. So in that, because of that, you have to use my client server application, which requires you to have the USB connection to the 705. Okay, so yes, you have to use the USB connection. Now, all of the Icom and Yaesu radios have USB ports that are extremely susceptible to RFI. Okay, and typically what happens is when there's any kind of an RFI, serial port just closes down. All right. So, excuse me. So basically you need a ferrite on the USB cable, and there's only one ferrite that does it. It's an FT240-31. The round ring's 2 inches in diameter, but you put that on there with a few turns of your USB and then you never have a problem again. So
Thank you. That's great. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Tom.
I'd like to jump in on the RFI problem. You're right, Tom, about the ferrite rings. It takes about 11 turns of your USB cable through that ring, and that will solve it. I've had that problem here, and that fixed it. And back to you.
Yeah, I have that in the manual, and I emphasize it so much, and well, nobody reads the manual. So they call me up. The software keeps shutting down. And, you know, it can be so bad that you actually have to turn off your computer because it can really mess up the hardware, and the USB port will just disappear unless you power it off and then power it back on.
Ooh, not good. All righty. Anybody else have any comments, questions? All right, hearing none, Tom, I'm going to definitely say thank you for joining us here on CQ Blind Ham's Tech Zoom. Do you have any contact info you want to give in case anybody wants to get a hold of you, or a website where they can learn about your products?
There's basically 3 separate websites. One's VA2FSQ.com, and that's Elecraft. And then there's Yaesu.va2fsq.com and Icom.va2fsq.com. So 3 websites. They're significantly different in their, capabilities and whatever, so they are separate.
All right, very good. And I assume there's a contact info there in case somebody wants to reach out to you via email or some other way?
Yes, under the support entry on the website.
Awesome. And Chris, if you're there, I'm going to kick it back to you there since you introduced Tom. Do you want to have any last words?
No, other than just to say thank you for doing all this great work. I'm sure we all appreciate it, and I hope you do get some feedback from some of us as we try it. And I know I'll be using my club's 7300 a fair bit remotely. I'm thrilled to be able to get back on HF that way. So, and nice to see you on our groups.io, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know if you can handle all the traffic on there, but because you're very busy, but feel free to post updates there if you have any accessibility news or new versions or anything.
Okay, great. Sure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank everybody for coming here to CQ Blind Ham's Tech Zoom. I guess that'll conclude the formal portion of this meeting. And now with the 73 all, thanks for listening. And remember, www.blindhams.com to learn more about our group, the bridge, and all the wonderful resources that live there. This has been Julian, N1CA, and 73 all.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and visit www.blindhams.com.